I am so grateful for conversations like these being had in open social media spaces. For those with no context, there was a post on LinkedIn that said the idea that there was a period in time where women did not work is flawed. Women have always worked. Domestic labor is a labor that remains uncompensated. And so this inspired a spirited conversation in which I took place. I participated in. I appreciate every viewpoint that was shared by both men and women, whether I agree with your point of view or not. And I felt inspired to add this to the conversation in a deeper way than what is available on LinkedIn. And so I'm recording this response. First, I want to say to men, you are loved. We women love you. We need you, and we want you in our lives. This will always be so. I think any time that women begin having public conversations that involve the role of leadership that men have stewarded for thousands of years, anytime words like patriarchy are being thrown about, I feel that largely there is a restriction and a recoil from men to the point that they are on the defensive right away, which may impact their ability to just hear what women are speaking. And so what conversations like these are asking of you is to step into the perception and experience of another just for a moment to try to glean from them a different perspective. In talking about the role of motherhood, raising children, marriage, the dynamics of all of these, and how society views and ranks these, there are so many different perspectives on the same issues. Men who are still married, hopefully happily, who regard the institution of marriage as sacred, who see themselves as providers for their families, and they are showing up to that faithfully. Conversations like these can come across as disparaging to something that feels sacred to you. And I want to acknowledge that. What I would say to you is that you're not wrong. I do think the institution of marriage is a sacred thing. Can we create enough space in this conversation for many conflicting truths to be present and witnessed at the same time? Because it's possible for something that is sacred to be treated as less than that by others. And these comments from so many women with so many different backgrounds, educations, socioeconomic statuses, all are sharing how this institution has served to not protect them as women, to not protect the sacred work they do in raising the next generation, and to not demonstrate an intrinsic value for them, but rather to diminish them, to control and manipulate them, to limit their choices and freedoms, and to keep them in line. So it goes without saying that anytime we have a system in place that is meant to do one thing and it's having a different effect, even if it's just on a segment of the population, we as a society have to honestly review that system to see where the gold is. Okay, what about this system is worth preserving for the next generation? And what about it is outdated and no longer serving our highest and best good? These are valid and critical questions that are worthy of our consideration, especially if you favor that current system and you benefit from it. I think many conservative men tend to hold the perspective that the breakdown of the family unit and of gender roles as upheld for the past few thousand years and defined by religious scripture is largely because this breakdown is because of someone else, someone outside of themselves, whether that be feminism or the gay agenda, as it's often referred to, or general sin and lawlessness and rejection of the Christian paradigm of salvation. And I want to propose to you that it's much more complex and multifaceted than this. And I'm inviting you to put down your defenses and just be open to listening to different perspectives, even for just a few moments. First, I want to acknowledge that anytime someone begins saying something or communicating something that's true for them that goes against what you feel to be truth for you, it's natural to feel as if that person is attacking you personally. So, in my study of consciousness, I understand that this is just a protective mechanism of the mind. Our minds are actually designed to reinforce through experience whatever we believe to be true. It's creating a loop of validation, even if that truth is harmful to us. Typically, those truths are established in childhood and they are unconscious. So I'm stating ahead of time that I have no need for you to believe anything that I believe. I'm not seeking to force anything on anyone. I simply seek to open our minds and perspectives to consider a wider point of view than before. That's it. Great. So back to the topic. The system of marriage was set up in a patriarchal society at a time when men possessed women as property. It's important to just see this, to acknowledge it, to allow this truth to seep into our bones as we feel into the many-faceted jewel that the institution of marriage is. When this system was established, as we know it today, it was done so in a social atmosphere that considered women unintelligent, who were disqualified from being educated, from having a voice in matters of state. Even the matter of their own spirituality was not theirs to steward as their own. Today, looking back, there's no question whatsoever that we would call that repression. There's no question about the competence and ability of women to be educated, to navigate complex matters, and to be stewards of their own spiritual, physical, and economic lives separate from a man. That doesn't invalidate the man. It invites all of us to up our game. We're all being initiated on a deep level right now to expand our vision for what partnership truly looks like and truly is, and to bring more equality into that equation. But looking back, these changes didn't spontaneously happen. They came about from the voices of those who were oppressed, whose oppression became so unbearable that the threat of social disgrace, ostracization, even death were no longer enough to hinder them from speaking up. It's only through the voices of the repressed feminine that the masculine has conceded and relented and changed certain parameters of what's acceptable by women in society. for good or bad or both. Our society has changed drastically since the inception of marriage and its purpose, which, by the way, has been many different things over the centuries. At one point, it was just a contractual obligation where the woman actually did, manage huge households and was respected and all of these things. However, the force behind all of this change is freedom. I suggest, as a person of faith, and I put faith in quotation marks because my expression of faith may not be the same as yours, but my faith is in God and in humanity. I am not of any specific religion anymore, but I'm a person dedicated to surrendering to the will of God for my life, to exploring the full power of co-creating that has been given to me, that's intrinsic to me just from being a human being, to hearing that voice of that will from within me and allowing the Spirit of God to inform me in every present moment of what is good and right and best for me without the input of any person above my own connection to Spirit. That doesn't mean I don't have spiritual teachers. That doesn't mean that I'm not in spiritual community. It means ultimately that I am stewarding my own instructions, if you will, from God about how I am to live my life, separate from any man, system, or doctrine. I suggest that this same Spirit, which animates all of life, is always moving and co-creating with us for our highest and best good. That means every change that's happening in our society, whether we can see the good in it or not right now, is not happening outside of the guidance of that Spirit. This is the overall perspective I invite you to consider, especially conservative men, because God is not a man nor a woman, but both male and female and beyond gender. And if you believe all those who are questioning this system or any other one, even your religious system, if you believe them to be separate from God, from the voice of God within them, then your default, and if your default rather, is to discredit what they are saying, then you are part of the problem. Those which you feel that it is your duty and your honor to protect, you are dismissing their voices and invalidating them because they are not in alignment with your theology. May I bring this conversation about feminism, patriarchy, religion, and marriage to an apex? I can speak for no other but myself, but there are many voices of feminism out there that do not align with my worldview. Yet, I believe all voices matter, and that I must be open to considering viewpoints that are not in alignment to my own. Let's get to the heart of what many of these women are asking for in expressing their voices. And that is the heart of freedom, love, respect, and honor. You personally may be doing everything in your power to express these in your marriage and to your wife and children, as many men here in this conversation have expressed. but as a part of a larger system. It is all the more important for you to see and acknowledge that most are not having the same experience as you are. I say most because you can clearly see the rates of divorce going up and up. You clearly see there are more single moms than there are single man households. Single fathers that are raising children. Although this is shifting, and it's beautiful to see the shift. But the point being, many men even blame women and see them as ungrateful for their service to them. A deeper question is, why are so many women unhappy and feeling that the sacrifices and requirements of them within marriage are more and more outweighing whatever benefit that they're getting from it? That's a whole other conversation that I'm not going to get into. There are many sub-conversations underlying in this. I saw one conversation about, men working harder than women and all of this stuff. What about men doing dangerous jobs and all of that stuff? None of these comments are meant to belittle or diminish men in their achievements, in what it is, the level of work that they're doing. Men who are putting themselves at great risk for the benefit of society. None of that is under question in this conversation. And another issue that was brought up is the issue of child support and men historically not having parental rights. There are many injustices on both sides here. All of them are reinforced through prejudices that we inherited from the previous generation that deserve to be reevaluated. What women are asking for is a shift of value on a global social level. A shift, especially in the Western society. I will say other societies are doing a better job than we are. A shift that puts the nurture and care of the next generation as its top priority, regardless of which gender is administering that care. We're talking about above the priority of profit, above the priority of governmental agendas, of system party agendas, of religious agendas, above earning money, above consumerism, right? That's the shift that has to happen. And because the system as it exists was built on a structure of patriarchy, it's up to men and women, but men need to vocalize the changes they want to see that will help shift this. You may not have set up the system, but it's a system designed for you to benefit you the most. So it's incumbent upon you to be willing to look deeply and to see the holes, to see the unfairness that exists in the system, to call it out, and to be an advocate for change. And what I've just said, if you're doing that, God bless you. I'm not saying that you personally aren't. This conversation is a general, overall conversation. Women who have, it's important for you to see women who have dedicated their lives to serving their husbands and children in the home solely. They have not had a career outside of the home. They most are utterly devastated when the men who said they would love, protect, and provide for them want a divorce. How then does that service then translate into the job market? Right now it doesn't, not for the woman. I'm not saying that men are not in a category also that they don't suffer in these situations. But society isn't judging your value in the marketplace and your ability to earn money any differently when the divorce happens to you. Do you see the economic disparity in this? This is the inequality that women are speaking about, that they are asking you to see. I know that men suffer too when divorce happens. Many must pay alimony and child support, feeling drained dry by the experience. So my whole passion for this conversation is to get us to begin to ask, what would it look like if career and family life were mutually supporting each other in our society? Men are becoming more and more involved with domestic responsibilities, as it should be. Women are becoming more and more involved with helping to earn an income and support the family, as it should be. Whatever you want to do is good. Men can nurture too. We each have both masculine and feminine polarity within us. Women are not just a feminine essence. We have an inner masculine. Men are not just the masculine essence. They have an inner feminine. Most men, especially from older generations, were taught and encouraged that being a man means not being too emotional or emotional at all. What this has resulted in is men who are disconnected from their own hearts, who are led mostly by both their desires and their minds. The mind was never intended to lead, but to carry out the instructions of the heart. The heart is where we have our connection to the divine within us, where the Spirit of God speaks to us. And we have a clear voice within our heart that we can cultivate and hear from clearly and regularly to guide us in our lives. Why is it important for men to begin building relationships with their own emotions and heart? Because when their inner feminine is living in a fascist regime where it doesn't have a voice, that ends up showing up outside of you in society, in the way society is structured. Do men need to be in their emotions as much as women do? No, not unless you are choosing to live embodied more in your feminine expression, and that's your choice. But not having a relationship at all, or one that is very immature with your own emotions, is not serving society. Women also are largely deeply disconnected to their own inner feminine because society favors the masculine. I'm speaking over arcs of time. Clearly, we are seeing more of a shift now. Why is this even relevant to this discussion? Because, and this is to all of us, but especially to men, because you haven't developed the inner relationship that women have, generally speaking. If you don't heal your inner wounds, they will leak out into your relationships at home and at work. If you don't develop love and compassion for your own self, your heart, all the places, spaces, and ages of people inside of you who may feel disconnected from your conscious mind. If you don't nurture them back home within you, you can't be whole. Here's a hard truth. Jesus is not going to go inside of your heart and fix your childhood wounding. That is your work to do. He isn't responsible for that. And if you can't do that for yourself, you certainly can't do it for others. You certainly cannot have the compassion and empathy needed to make policy decisions and choices, whether in government, whatever sector of society that you're serving in. It's impossible for you to connect with and see something from another person's perspective outside of yourself, because you're not even connected to your own heart. You just can't. Nobody gets out of this work. This is what we call shadow work. We are a society addicted to chasing the light, the success, because it feels good. It doesn't feel good to be present with our wounded inner child. But if there are voices or desires within you that you are rejecting, judging, vilifying, shaming, banishing, ignoring, or swallowing, they will come out sideways in your life and fuck it up. Does that mean you give in to every one of them? No. But the very definition of darkness is simply that which has not yet been brought into the light, which is being brought from the unconscious to the conscious. If we're going to put marriage on a pedestal and call it sacred, then the definition of what that looks like needs a major upgrade. It's not enough to maintain the fading gender roles of service in the home and outside of it. Those are not serving us the way they did in the past. Women want to be empowered outside of the home. Men want closer relationships with their children. What does marriage look like where each person is sovereign, meaning they are taking full responsibility for their own needs, their own power, their own wants, their own shadows, and their own brilliance? Cultivating their relationship to both love and power within them, with their own pleasure. People pleasure is our birthright, while at the same time consciously choosing a partner, to partner with someone to share in that responsibility and grow together, rather than continuing the cycle of codependent relationships that we were born into. One where we are committed to seeing and owning and seeking to heal and to shift our tendencies to control, manipulate ourselves and others, to siphon energy from the other because we're too lazy to build up our own internal connection to source and our own inner belongingness. The world really hasn't seen a true highest example expression of sacred marriage. Not yet. Not in our modern time. When I say modern time, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of years. This is what we are being called into now as a society. This higher understanding of partnership. And if you want to insert the label of marriage, so be it. It should be sacred. Any external system of government, community, religion, society, entertainment that is still using control, profit, manipulation, and distraction as its driving force or as part of its methods for staying in power must be exposed and brought into the light. Because until everyone is free, none of us are truly free. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts on this conversation.